March 10, 1945. Dawn rose over Tokyo as a gray, choking veil, and in the silent hours after the firestorms burned themselves into ash, Japanese officers stepped out from underground command rooms and concrete shelters to see a capital that no longer resembled a city, but a warning. What many of them said in those hours, and what they wrote later in private diaries, interrogation rooms, and sealed reports never meant for public eyes, would form a dark confession whispered too late. An admission that American firepower had not simply overwhelmed Japan's defenses, but shattered the very assumptions on which its war had been built. Long before the fires reached Tokyo, Japanese generals had convinced themselves that spirit could outlast steel. They believed industrial inferiority could be offset by willpower, discipline, and a cultural refusal to surrender. This belief was not merely propaganda, it was doctrine. In war colleges, in staff meetings, and in classified memoranda, senior officers repeated the idea that American soldiers relied too heavily on machines, that their morale was soft, that their society lacked the endurance for sustained, bloody struggle. But hidden beneath those confident pronouncements were early signs of doubt, quietly recorded after encounters with American firepower in places most civilians never heard of: tiny islands, forgotten atolls, jungles that swallowed entire regiments. After Guadalcanal, General Hyakutake privately admitted to his staff that American artillery coordination exceeded expectations. His words never appeared in public statements. They were buried in after-action reports stamped secret, where he noted that U.S. naval gunfire seemed endless, precise, and psychologically devastating, striking positions believed secure hours earlier. On New Guinea, Japanese officers observed something they had not anticipated. American logistics moved like a living organism, feeding guns faster than Japan could silence them. In one intercepted diary, later translated by U.S. intelligence, a colonel wrote that the enemy appeared to manufacture ammunition the way Japan produced rice, continuously, without visible limit. Still, the High Command dismissed these observations as localized anomalies. The decisive blow, they believed, would come when Americans were forced to assault the inner defensive ring. There, Japanese generals promised, the cost in blood would break American resolve. What they did not fully grasp was that American firepower was not designed merely to support infantry. It was intended to replace them whenever possible. Bombardment would soften, shatter, and sometimes erase defenses before a single Marine stepped ashore. Saipan changed the tone of Japanese internal communications. After the island fell in July 1944, intercepted radio messages revealed a shift from defiance to disbelief. One general wrote that the enemy's shelling did not cease day or night, as if the earth itself had become hostile. Another remarked that even caves, once considered sacred fortresses, had become tombs under relentless bombardment. These statements never reached the Japanese public. They were sealed, classified, and in some cases deliberately destroyed, but fragments survived in captured documents and post-war interrogations. What truly terrified Japanese commanders was not just the volume of American firepower, but its integration. Air, sea, and land forces operated as a single system. Radar-guided naval guns fired unseen. Carrier aircraft struck with clock-like precision. Artillery units coordinated with aerial spotters in ways Japan could not replicate. In secret briefings, generals admitted they were fighting not an army, but a machine intelligence fueled by industry. After the Battle of the Philippine Sea, some officers privately referred to American carriers as mobile continents. The phrase never appeared in official communiques. It was too demoralizing. Yet the truth was unavoidable. Each carrier task force brought more aircraft than entire regional air commands of the Imperial Japanese Army. Losses that would cripple Japan barely slowed the Americans. One general, speaking in confidence to a subordinate, reportedly said that destroying an American carrier felt like trying to empty the ocean with a bucket.
By late 1944, psychological warfare had begun to seep into Japanese awareness. Leaflets dropped by American planes were dismissed publicly as cowardly tricks, but internally they caused unease. Some contained accurate details about unit locations and supply shortages, suggesting intelligence penetration deeper than admitted. Japanese generals began to suspect that their communications were compromised, that American firepower was guided not only by industrial might but by information superiority. This realization bred paranoia. Officers accused one another of leaks. Radios were destroyed. Orders were carried by messengers who often never returned. Then came Iwo Jima. In post-war testimony, General Kuribayashi's surviving staff revealed his grim understanding of American firepower. Unlike others, he did not promise victory. He expected annihilation. His strategy, to force the enemy to pay in blood, was an acknowledgement that firepower could not be matched, only endured. Yet even Kuribayashi underestimated the depth of American preparation. The pre-invasion bombardment lasted days. Underground defenses were crushed not by courage but by sustained explosives designed specifically to penetrate volcanic rock. Later, a captured Japanese officer confessed that the bombardment felt inhuman, not because it was cruel, but because it lacked emotion, rhythm, or pause. It simply continued.
Okinawa sealed the realization. Japanese generals watched entire divisions dissolve under naval gunfire and aerial bombing before meaningful contact occurred. Kamikaze attacks, conceived as a desperate counterbalance to American material superiority, achieved psychological shock but failed strategically. In a secret meeting recorded in surviving notes, a senior officer admitted that sacrificing pilots could not compensate for the enemy's ability to replace ships, planes, and men faster than Japan could replace fuel. He wrote that American firepower functioned as an economy of death, scaled to infinity. By the time American B-29s began systematic firebombing of Japanese cities, many generals already knew the war was lost. What they did not anticipate was the sheer destructiveness of the raids. The Tokyo firebombing killed more civilians in a single night than either atomic bomb would later do individually. In private reflections, some officers expressed horror not just at the destruction, but at how efficiently it was executed. Incendiary patterns were calculated, wind conditions analyzed, neighborhoods mapped for maximum effect. One general later told interrogators that it was the first time he understood American warfare as a science rather than an art. After Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the silence within Japan's high command was heavy and irreversible. Post-war interrogations conducted by American intelligence revealed admissions never voiced before. One general stated plainly that Japan had misunderstood modern war, believing bravery could offset physics. Another said American firepower was not merely destructive, but demoralizing because it removed the enemy from sight. There was no duel, no moment of honor, only sudden obliteration delivered from beyond reach. In the years that followed, as surviving generals wrote memoirs and testimonies, many chose their words carefully. Publicly, they spoke of tragedy, sacrifice, and inevitability. Privately, in letters and unpublished manuscripts, they spoke of regret. Regret for ignoring early warnings, for underestimating an enemy whose true weapon was not the bomb or the gun, but the system that produced them endlessly. Some admitted they had known, long before the end, that Japan could not win once America's full industrial capacity was unleashed. They continued anyway, bound by ideology, fear, and the weight of decisions already made. What Japanese generals said about American firepower after it was too late was not a single statement, but a scattered confession written across ruins, records, and memories. It was the realization that modern war had crossed a threshold where courage without resources became sacrifice without purpose, and where the hidden engines of production, intelligence, and coordination decided outcomes long before the final shots were fired. In that realization lies one of the darkest truths of World War II.
Not that Japan was defeated, but that the nature of war itself had changed forever, and those who recognized it last paid the highest price for learning it too late.